Eagles and Bears. Value: blessed are the peacemakers. The war had been going on for centuries, the war between the eagles and the bears. Nobody in the forest knew what started the war, but everyone knew how often bears were injured terribly or killed by dive-bombing eagles, or just as often, eagles were killed in large numbers by sudden attacks by bears, or as they dove and the bears swatted them from the sky. Far too often, the ones hurt the most were the children or babies or mommies of the baby eagles and bears who wanted nothing more than peace to raise their children. Nevertheless, rumor had been in the air for a long time of a war to end all wars. A final battle was coming that would pit every bear in the woods against every eagle, and a final victor would emerge. But nobody knew when that day would come. But that day did come before anyone was prepared for it. It came when Bartholomew Bear was playing in the woods by himself. He wasn't supposed to do that, but sometimes children forget the warnings of their parents because they want so much to explore and learn. He was chasing a butterfly, laughing and leaping at it from a log to a stump to a rock and then to the ground. Suddenly, he felt a shooting pain in his foot. He cried out before he even knew what happened, but he heard the snap of the man's trap close on his foot, and he knew he was in big trouble. He must have cried for hours, wishing his mommy or daddy would come. Little did he know they were preparing for the final battle, the war to end all wars with the eagles. The butterfly lit on his bare shoulder. "Can't you get your big foot out, Bartholomew?" the butterfly said. "I want to play some more." "No," the little bear cried, big tears in his eyes. "This trap has my leg in these pointy claws, and it really hurts." "There is another one right next to it," Mr. Butterfly observed. "Make sure you don't get your other foot in it. I will fly for help." "Yes, please hurry," the sad little bear begged his friend. It was not long later that Bartholomew saw his help coming. Dozens and dozens of bears appeared on the ridge. "Wow, they sent everyone," he remarked to himself as more and more bears lined up on that ridge and just stood there staring over at the other ridge on the opposite side of the valley Bartholomew was in. On the other side, the army of the eagles was gathering. Filling the trees of the thick forest there, they dug their talons in and stared hatefully at the army of bears just across the way, not knowing the poor helpless bear cub was trapped between them. "Daddy, help me!" Bartholomew's voice suddenly rang out. Both armies looked into the valley and recognized the plight of the child bear. He was crying loudly as he looked up, spotting his mommy and daddy in the bear army on the ridge. Oh, the hearts of that mommy and daddy were torn seeing their child in that spot. When the battle begins in just moments, the two armies will rush into that valley, and the killing will be most awful. The chieftain of the eagles watched the little bear. His heart was touched, but not enough to call off the attack. "Daddy, we have to stop it," his son Edgar Eagle said to him, perched on the same branch with him. "No, son," the king of the eagles declared. "We can only hope somehow the bear child survives the battle." The chieftain of the eagles watched the situation, unwilling to call the attack, but unwilling to call it off. He did not see the tiny Mr. Butterfly light on the beak of Edgar Eagle. The entire army of bears was in anguish watching Bartholomew struggle. But despite the beggings of Bartholomew's mommy and daddy, the king of the bears would not call off the attack. The clamor for war began to rise, and Bartholomew was terribly afraid. Suddenly, before the call to attack, a lone eagle soared out from the wooded side of the valley ridge. All eyes were glued to that lone figure as it did several near spins and spirals down in long, elegant arches toward the stranded Bartholomew. All of a sudden, the king of the eagles knew who it was. "Edgar!" The cry went out, and both armies tensed, knowing the son of the king of the eagles had gone into the valley first. He landed at the side of the frightened bear and looked at his injured leg. "Don't worry," Edgar said to Bartholomew. "I come to help." But as he moved around assessing the problem, snap! The other trap closed on Edgar's foot. While Edgar was a soldier, the pain of the trap caused him to cry out in misery. Without a call to war, suddenly two figures burst from either side of the valley. The king of the eagles shot from the ranks to the aid of his son, and the king of the bears rushed to help the fallen Bartholomew. Seeing their kings rush to save the children, both sides suddenly dropped their armor and weapons and rushed into the valley. The thunderous stampede was not a charge to battle and death, but to save the precious youth and for mercy. Within moments, the two armies were working like a single-minded people to free the children. The bears had the strength to pull open the traps, and the eagles the keen eyesight and ability to figure out the mechanisms, so they opened them safely. Slowly and carefully, the traps were pulled from the legs of Bartholomew and Edgar, and they were free. Bartholomew rushed to the arms of the king of the bears, weeping with gratitude, and Edgar to the king of the eagles, embracing him for stopping the attack to save their lives. Then, just as though it was the natural thing to do, Bartholomew ran to the king of the eagles and embraced him, and Edgar wept in the arms of the king of the bears. A thunderous shout of celebration went up from both armies. The war was over forever. Never again would the bears and the eagles live in warfare, but instead they would be brothers and friends for eternity. And all because the son of the king was willing to fly into the valley, and was willing to give his life to save his enemy, and give him life instead of death.